flying. I learned about flying from that.
No.
So they're actually started out as articles in Flying Magazine, and they were just small, short snippets of stories from just pilots, either mostly recreational, about just things that has happened to them and weird, mishaps and crashes and what happened, like what the cause of them were. So there's a whole book, and there's a ton of them now that they just kind of take all the articles and publish them. And I was just talking to Suna yesterday about it because I didn't realize she was a pilot, and she is. And I told her I'd give her the title, but it's just a compilation of all those stories, and it's really interesting. You read about all different aircrafts and all different pilots and what their problems were, and you actually really learn a lot about things that, like, oh, if I encountered that, interesting, like that's what this guy did.
And it's called I Learned About Flying from That?
Yeah.
I've written it down.
It's really good. And they're only like, 2 or 3 page stories.
That'd be great.
For instance, I learned that I should never tie a kayak to the outside of a float plane.
Uh-oh, you took off with the
Not
kayak
me. I read the story about it, and I was like, well, I probably wouldn't do that anyway, but the story really sunk it in. It came loose, and it hit his rudder, and he ended up having to crash land. But he tied the knot wrong is what happened.
It seems like a bad idea in general.
If you enjoy
the
recreational flying,
tradition.
Jimmy Buffett has written some books that talk about his modern day recreational flying, and just it's like, yeah, if I could have any plane in the world and do whatever I wanted, well, that's kind of what his
cowboy days.
No, his current stuff.
Oh, now.
Yeah, he's got that. It's an albatross.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the name of his plane?
What is? That is the name?
No, I was wondering.
Oh, I don't know.
The Cheeseburger in Paradise?
Parrot
Head. November, da-da-da-da-da, JB. Juliet.
Yeah, maybe. But his books are really well written about aviation and how he found the plane and what he does with it. Yeah.
So we have a question coming in about
Good.
Our storage space for all the data and video and everything like that.
That's a great question. Let me go get Justin. So we have numerous data silos on board. We use protected storage, typically RAID 5 spinning hard drives. So that provides some redundancy. So if you have parodies written across a bunch of hard drives, if you lose one of the drives, the others contain enough information to make up for the lost drive. And you also increase the speed of them. Some of our RAIDs are RAID 0, so we just mirror everything. But all of our side scan data and everything is written to like a RAID 0 protected storage, multiple arrays. Our video content's a little different because for 2 reasons. One is volume. We capture a lot of content. Right now we're only recording 1 camera. Normally we do twice that. And so there's a lot of volume. The other is speed. Video is not fault tolerant. And so if you fail to write data in 1/30th of a second, the whole house of cards comes crumbling down. Recording stop, it's just a mess. So you have to have high throughput storage. So we have a different solution there in that our data recorder or video recorders are connected to a storage array that contains 100 terabytes of storage. And we write about 300 megabytes per second. Megabits. Sorry. And that's a lot of content. And that's per recorder. So we can have an aggregate that's pretty high up there. And that's because we write as we record, we write 3 files at one time. 3 different types of files are recorded all the time. And we record in 15-minute chunks. And these files are actively being copied over to yet another RAID for protection. So we have them in a protected storage silo, and that's put into another protected storage silo. From the second protected storage silo, they are written off to LTO tapes, which are archival tapes, computer tapes. And each file is written to 2 tapes. These cartridges are completely sealed, so the writing happens through the case. And once those files have been confirmed against the second silo, then we know that the files in the original silo are okay to be deleted. And we delete them on a as needed, first in, first out, a FIFO scheme. So I think we saw the first expedition of the year maybe on there still. So as we need space, we'll delete that expedition. When we come into port occasionally, one of those sets of LTO tapes gets sent back to our facility at the University of Rhode Island at the Inner Space Center and is transferred to a protected silo there. So we're following all of the best practices for critical digital assets, but very, very cautious. There's no reshoots. We can't come out here and get it again. So if, we're ready for anything to happen in front of this camera, and we treat it as, the important asset that it is, simply because we can't do it again. And for some of the scientists and researchers that come out here, the video files are the deliverable. That's why they came here. We've got that down. We've made some improvements recently where researchers now, when they leave the vessel, they'll have a copy of the 2 lower bandwidth sets of video to take with them. So they can be on the plane home and looking at their content and starting to edit with it, etc., write papers. And then we have just a whole bevy of logs. Rennie might be able to speak to this a little bit, but we have a ship's log, GPS log, we have ROV logs, we have navigational information, we have mapping data. We just store, and there's a whole standardized product that we deliver, and all of that's available here on the vessel at that ship house URL that Justin talked about in our first briefing. And that's always updated and available to look at in a wide variety of formats. So it's trying to meet the needs of the large user community and protect these assets. That's a little bit about the storage. Missing anything there, Rennie?
Multi-beam data.
Yeah, mapping.
Mapping data is...
There's a lot of data with when we do map.
Yeah.
It's not just one file.
Yeah, we have all the vehicle position data, all the notes we're taking. When we're mapping, it's all of that data and then subsequent products we're making for it. It's more digestible by different means, whether it's a scientist who just has Google Earth or a national data repository that wants the raw data and everything in between.
What are those Earth files? Are those KMLs?
Those are, yeah, KMZs.
KMZ?
Yeah. And that's all solely digital. I mean, we also collect physical samples. If it's biology, it usually goes to Harvard's Museum of Comparative Zoology. If it's geological, it goes to the rock repository at Graduate School of Oceanography at University of Rhode Island. I think that's, unless individual, and usually what happens is because of where our funding comes from, it's directed to those repositories first, and then scientists request it from there, even if they've actually sailed on the cruise. It kind of goes there first, and they request it, and they can check it out.
Yeah, so the repository acts as a lending library, so we don't have to manage that, but it still affords access to researchers from all over the world.
Are those libraries searchable?
Don't know. Haven't used them. I just don't know.
Like,
Yeah.
can you search the library for a subject or a date, the video library or the map library?
The mapping information, yeah, that eventually gets passed off to NCEI, National Center for Environmental Information, through a couple different channels. We hand it off to an organization called R2R, Rolling Deck to Repository, and then NCEI grabs from there. And NCEI, once they have it, you can search that visually and see what ships have collected data where and grab it.
I thought all that was going to show up in Google Oceans, but
eventually
I haven't seen it yet.
They they take their data from organizations such as NCEI.
But there's a very long time between when you map something and it shows up in Google Earth.
Yeah.
Very long time.
Yeah, we
couple
mapped
years.
the new island at Hungatonga in
It should be there in 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, it's been like 3 years ago. It's
Yeah.
2016.
Yeah, it depends on where that went.
Still.
Where
Where
is
the data
that?
went.
NASA.
If it's at NCEI
Where?
yet.
Oh, where was it?
Yeah, nowhere.
Tonga. It's a region in Tonga. It's a new island. You can see it on Google Earth
That's
from
cool.
the
Oh,
From
that
the
was
satellites.
Schmidt?
Yeah, don't they get like the
yeah.
gravity
So-
information from like on the ocean surface, and they can tell you?
Yeah,
like,
satellite
it's-
altimetry.
Yeah.
That's what the kind of the base ocean map, bathymetric map is on something like, say, Google Earth, and then multibeam is refining that. So the satellite altimetry is satellites taking measurements of the sea surface, and over time you can eliminate tide and waves and all that stuff, and the actual surface of the sea has bulges in it that are basically the sea surface is being affected by what the bathymetry below, due to mass and gravity. So through those bulges in the sea surface, you can tell a very rough estimate of what's going on below. And sometimes it's, depending on how deep it is and what the feature is, it can be a bit off when we go to multi-beam it.
Is it ready on SPL?
Yes.
Okeanos is also, is that
Yeah.
data going to NASA as well?
I don't know. NASA?
I know the stuff we took around Hungatonga was, Vicky Farini was out there and she was collaborating with NASA to kind of ground truth what the satellites
Okeanos
we're seeing.
mapping goes into R2R.
We're a bit low there, Summer.
Say what?
Getting a little low.
Single digits.
Yeah, you're right.
Peyton, I hope you
Mesmerized
got
by
that.
orange.
That's another awesome, ready explanation.
Although it is kind of nice to see the seafloor.
Yeah. We could just hang out down there.
Yeah.
So smooth and unremarkable.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the closer we are to it, the less of an area we're actually seeing.
Yeah.
So has our data made it to Google Oceans in some cases? Or?
Probably
Still in
not
the pipeline.
there yet. It's now in rolling deck to repository, and parts of it are in NCEI. And then I believe that Google gets their data from either JEBCO, GMRT, or from NCEI directly. If it sounds complicated, it is. There's a global project right now. Look up Seabed 2030. It's by hosted a project started by the Nippon Foundation and JEBCO to understand. Basically, the project is to map all of the seafloor within certain parameters by the year 2030. But the first kind of phase of that project is collecting the data we already have and assimilating it into a single source. Governments are collecting it, individual scientists, universities are collecting data. If industry has a lower resolution that they're willing to part with, and industry partners like Fugro, they can donate data. So through that effort alone, just assimilating what we already have, there's been kind of a general increase in the amount of percent of the ocean that's been mapped, but there's still a long way to go.
So can we see that data as the general public?
I
or is
would
it still
well, it's
being
I think
assimilated?
yeah, I think it's being assimilated, but I think JEBCO would probably have the NCEI is U.S. only, I think.
Right.
But US easy. Could be wrong about that. But JEBCO would be the best place to check. I don't know how often I don't think that they necessarily produce their global ocean map as the data comes in. I think that they kind of assimilate and then present it at individual times, but I could be wrong about that. I'm sure Lindsay's writing in right now to tell me about how wrong I am, but
We have a question coming in about the side scan sonar. Would it potentially be able to pick up a whale fall?
Can't hear you at all, man.
Can you hear me at all?
there you go.
Yeah, no,
Yeah?
better. Yeah.
Would
Would
it-
side scan be able to pick up a whale fall?
Yeah, it depends on how far off the seafloor the whale fall's sitting
Yeah.
and how close.
If it fell yesterday, probably.
Yeah. I would say probably yes.
I don't
I'll
think
take it.
those are frequent events, though.
What's the deepest ever whale sighting?
No idea. I've seen all those beak impressions in the
Looking it up.
Gulf.
Right.
Peyton's on it.
The whale
I would
scouring.
assume it'd be sperm whale for sure. Okay. Oh. Interesting. Okay, let me just confirm this before I report on it.
We have a question from a viewer on SAT-3, what the red and green lines below our map represent.
The red and green lines on the map on SAT-3. Yeah. The red line is the line that we're currently going to run. Right now we're waiting for Argus to catch up to the ship a bit before we do a fancy turn maneuver. The green lines are either, they're inactive lines, so we've either already mapped them or we are going to map them.
Then, of course, there's relief.
Yes, the white lines are 5 meter spaced contours overlaid on a bathymetric map collected by multi-beam on the Okeanos Explorer for the Capstone project.
What about at the very bottom of the screen, where there's a green box that says 187?
Those. So the ship's pilots, the mates who are driving the vessel, they are actually using that once we're on a selected line to see how far off they are, port or starboard, from the line. So they're not actually driving based on where this little tiny ship is on the line. They get an idea of that when they're doing turns, for example. But when they're actually on the line driving it, they can see how far off they are in meters to port or starboard.
Just keep that little thing that's over to the far right now. When we're on a line, you try and keep it centered.
And you can see it makes sense right now because our ship is 185 meters to the starboard of the selected line, which is the red line running towards the east-northeast. Checks out.
Sounds good.
All right, so I have an answer to that question. So it's the, let me just check that I'm pronouncing this correctly. There's no pronunciation information. It's Cuvier's beaked whale,
Yes.
otherwise known as the goose-beaked whale, and they were documented to dive as deep as 2,992 meters, which is almost as deep as we are right now. And that was documented in 2014 in a behavioral study.
So I
we
wonder if they
could-
tagged
we could
them or
see
if
a
they just
whale.
found the imprints of the beaks on the bottom.
They tagged them. And apparently the dive was 2 hours and 17 minutes long before it resurfaced.
Wow.
It was pretty impressive.
That's crazy.
It's a long time to hold your breath.
Argus linked. Yeah, so they put tags on them on or near the dorsal fin using just a dart. And then dive data collected using behavior log function. And then I think they were using the Argos float system or Argos satellite system to collect data about their dive patterns.
Well, what were they doing down there?
That's a good question. I'm looking through the study.
They had a little scuba tank down there. They were getting more air from.
Crafty whales.
That would that'd probably be a bad idea, because then the decompression obligation would be weeks if you breathe compressed air at depth.
Okay, so typically their dives for beaked whales are separated into either long, deeper dives. Usually it says here that they're associated with foraging by the presence of echolocation clicks and or evidence of prey chases, while there are shorter, shallower dives that don't really indicate any searching or chase. So it's most likely that they were just looking for food, hunting fish or other species. And then one more detail from the study, because they were just tagging their dive depth and location, as well as duration, they don't have any concrete data on what kind of foraging habits they're using, or whether or not diving deeper is going to provide more advantages. So that's definitely a question for future scientific exploration.
And what was the location of the study?
Let me check. San Nicolas Basin, off Los Angeles.
It says the whale's rib cage can fold down, so to reduce air pockets and decrease buoyancy.
And they've also deployed tags in, so this study was off Southern California, but there are others that were also done in the Ligurian Sea and Hawaii.
Cool, thanks.
Rennie, did they find any other targets along this line?
What line?
The one we're on, like behind us? Like, is there any?
We were on it for most of it, I think.
Oh.
I don't believe so.
No.
The last target we marked was on line 17.
Roger.
And after this line, what do we have?
21.
Two more to the north. And then, yeah, a lot.
So two more
to the
including
west.
this one?
No, after.
Yeah, after this we have one more above us?
We are about to get on the second to last line of the North Survey. So there are two more lines.
Do we have the same multi-beam that the Okeanos has?
Yeah.
They,
wait, they...
No, they also have an EM302, but it's a half-degree system, and ours is a 1-degree system, so it's slightly better.
I can't, like, I'm so impressed, like, I have to, it's even the very subtle shading difference I can tell, and I know that I have to pull up the winch. It's very accurate.
They replaced their heads a couple years ago.
Mm.
So the question that just came in about, is there any plan or interest in recovering any portion of the clipper for museum display or detailed analysis? That is entirely up to our science team.
If we recovered any samples at all, they would be for research and study for diagnostics and also for information about the deterioration, information about the chemical changes that are going on, the biology that is living on them, and how they're interacting with the saltwater environment. Museum display might be something that happened much later, but that wouldn't be the reason for our collection.
Great question. Keep them coming.
It's hard to hear you, Brian.
Bridge nav. Can we proceed to the selected target? Thank you.
How about now?
Good.
Try down 2 clicks.
Great.
Maybe 1. There. Yeah.
How about now? Still good?
Yeah.
Cool.
Still good.
Yep.
Wonderful.
I'm going to put a little hiss in there
Wunderbar.
by boosting you that much. Try that.
Testing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nice.
Pretty good.
Sweet. Greetings to our viewers. Oh, here's another one, Lonnie. China.
I have not been to China.
You have not been to China.
No,
That
my husband
surprises
has,
me.
but I didn't get to tag along.
I would have bet that you would have.
Oh, there's still time.
So China, Brazil, and
Israel
Israel
And
and
Australia.
And
and
Australia.
Australia. There's a list.
Man.
I know. I better get busy.
That's what happened with us when we put a map in our house. When we started putting pins where we've been, what ends up happening is you only see the places that don't have pins, which is good.
Had I asked you about Finland yet?
Oh, yes. Been to Finland. Love Finland.
You've been in most of the Nordic countries, if not all, yeah?
Well, I've lived for 4 years more than 4 years in Norway, and 2 years in Leningrad behind the Iron Curtain, and our Mecca was Helsinki.
All right.
I used to have to go there to buy groceries.
Wow. Have you been to Iceland?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's a great place.
Yeah, fabulous.
I want to go to Iceland.
Iceland Air now has flights from Seattle and from a lot of places in America. And they all go through Keflavik. And you can extend your layover by up to a week without your airfare changing at all.
We
Wow.
did that
Yeah.
actually on a flight to London.
Yeah, we did the same.
It was
And
great.
Yeah,
We-
we've done
Wow.
that too. That's
We
great.
actually, our neighbors had just been over, I think, in Denmark and Norway. And so they were returning home and we were headed to Amsterdam, and we spent 2 days in Iceland with the family that lives across the street from us, driving around and seeing all the sights. It's surreal. It's super fun.
The sites are so spread out, you have to rent a van and
Yeah.
really drive
Yeah.
the
You
route,
do.
the circle.
That's what we did. And it's also, it's like from Seattle, it's only 7 hours to Keflavik.
That's right.
wow.
And that's, you know, just slightly more than Philadelphia or New York. And then it's just a hop right over to the continent. So it's a great way to kind of get over that initial travel bump.
Yeah.
We did the same thing, my wife and I, when we were returning 2 years ago. We spent a couple days there. It's a bit spendy.
It is, but it's really nice to see all of the, they have a lot of environmental sites to see. And I
Yeah.
did manage actually to fool my husband into thinking that we were going to go on this great hike, and we went to go see an airplane instead. Because
You went
Your
out to
secret's
the,
out now.
that's a DC-8, right?
no, it's a DC-3, but it's actually
DC-3.
not a DC-3. It's like some sort of
Knockoff?
Navy version. It's like
Ah.
a C-1 something.
That's a great photography site.
It is.
Yeah.
And on the day that we went, it was, I forget how many miles it is in,
Yeah.
but on the day that we went, there was like a 50-mile-an-hour wind,
Oh.
like towards us. or no, sorry, going away from us. So we got to the site in like 45 minutes because the wind was just, and then turn around, and it took us like an hour and a bit to get back, and we were just going in the wind, and it was.
My favorite
really
shots
great.
of that aircraft are almost always when it's foggy there. It seems to shoot better then. Nice soft mist.
Does he trust you now when you suggest little trips?
No. No, he will act now. Okay,
Right.
where is the airplane in there?
We're just going to go
If
to
I
the mall to
suggest
pick
a
up one
hike,
thing.
he's like, where is the airplane?
Did you see the northern lights?
Not in Iceland, I didn't.
Oh.
I've only seen them once, and that was in a plane. I was going from Oslo up to Buda, and we saw them there, but I've never seen them on the ground.
So we've got a couple good questions coming in. If we found the plane, would Hercules dive to the site? And the answer is yes, but after we do a few different things, we need to kind of do a survey of the area to make sure there's no hazards or obstacles, no
We'll do that with her.
netting. Okay,
Yeah.
we'll do that with Hercules. And another question about the biological life that came in. We're not actually really expecting to find a lot of life living on this wreckage because of the depth and because of the material. The material definitely does play a role in whether organisms are attaching themselves to it, and also the depth at which it's at. So.
And then just to jump on that, you can kind of see, based on the rocks in this area, there isn't a lot of benthic organisms that are really residing on them. So we'll probably not be seeing much on the plane.
Yeah, which hopefully will work to our advantage if and when we find it, that it would be pretty well preserved.
Yeah.
How do you feel about this target?
Rainey, I was looking at this, and the more that it goes on, the more that I don't like it.
The more you don't. Okay.
But we can mark it because we haven't marked anything in a while, so.
It's up to you.
No, I don't like it. It looks like a lot of stuff that we've seen already.
Well, your husband remembers that hike fondly, and especially
that's good.
for the duration and how extremely cold it was.
Yeah, oh my gosh. We decided to go to Iceland in November, so that was a bad call.
Rennie, let me know when.
Yeah, we can
September
mark
and
this as the
October.
end of the
End of the line?
Yeah.
Okay.
End of line.
Can I get in here? I'm so sorry.
You probably got a great hotel
Thank
rate.
you, Nav.
Yeah, it was actually, we stayed in a couple Airbnbs, and yeah, just had a really great time going around.
Bridge now.
We ended up staying next to that
We can
hot dog
proceed to
stand,
the selected target.
which
Thank you.
is irresistible. Icelandic hot dogs are magical.
We did a bunch of Airbnbs and kind of very Icelandic, sort of modern places.
Yeah.
And then on the very last night, Tim was like, okay, we can, you're finding the hotel, we can stay where you want to stay. And so I chose this big, garish, like Viking style house with all of these wood carvings out, and it was so touristy, and I loved it.
Right.
I had such a great time.
The question that comes in about the multi-beam, we're not using multi-beam right now, we're using side scan sonar, and what you are seeing in that waterfall and the yellow line and the blue line are different frequencies. It is generally the same area. The yellow lined waterfalls are in fact a bit higher frequency, but not nearly as long in terms of field of view, and the blue is not nearly as high resolution, but covers a wider area.
And if you do want to see some example of multi-beam on, I believe, our third satellite feed, you can see sort of our navigation screen, and all of the sort of blue and the bathymetry lines that you're seeing, all of that topography has been mapped by the NOAA Okeanos Explorer. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is all done using multi-beam.
There you go.
So it's already been
Ooh.
mapped.
Yeah, so we're in the dead center of this survey area that they did a few passes. You can see their turns here. Did a few passes of the area. where the Samoan clipper was thought to be, obviously way outside the search box that we were able to look at, and to give us some data, lead up data.
In that lower left-hand corner, in the green, there appears to be a gap.
Yes.
What would have caused something like that?
Any number of things, but sonar related issues.
Yeah, restarting something.
It could have been a series of bad pings, bad data received. It could have been weather.
That's some solid data to start with, though.
Yeah, they did a great job covering that area. So, Dr. Megan, a viewer is interested in what made you decide not to mark that last target.
Just because viewers calling out my target choices now.
They're just interested in your insight.
No, I like it. Just because we have seen on our watch, everybody is getting better and better at being able to look at these targets and kind of imagine what they are. And for me, we've seen at least 2 or 3 other targets that look almost exactly like that. That's a very, very large target with a lot of different spaces. And just for me personally, I think that we've seen almost exactly the same thing. Rennie, what did you think about it?
Yeah, we were also we weren't driving perfectly straight. Argus was at the end, towards the end of the line, starting to drift to the north. I thought there was a bit of smearing in it. It's hard. You have to separate what you think looks like something special versus what the, kind of calibrate out some of the anomalies in the data, the distortion of the data. I think we saw a bit of a smear.
Yeah.
But the good thing about that target is when we run the next lines, we'll actually see it again.
Right.
So if it seems
and also
likely,
it was right at the end of our line, at the end of our recording, so I can always tell Michael that maybe we saw something that was directly before we stopped.
Yeah.
And named the file something else, so he can very quickly find it.
Yeah. But so our next lines will just kind of be going right along this, and I think we'll catch it again if need be. But I tend to agree that it doesn't.
I mean, it's not like we have a finite number of times that we can press the target button. So, in a sense, maybe we should be marking everything. But
in that same vein, he can also look at all again.
Correct.
In the post-processing and identify anything. So this is our first pass.
So I just didn't like it.
Didn't make the cut.
That's right. And everybody, for those of you who are watching and keep on watching after our watch, every single person who's marking these targets will like different things based on their personal preferences. So somebody else sitting here might have marked it.
Greetings to our American Samoa viewers. We are right off your coast.
Probably still in their waters.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, we would be if Okeanos had mapped it.
How does it work with other countries? Can you take your U.S. vessel and go into other countries?
They transit through, but they primarily only map or dive in the United States economic exclusion zones.
Wait, we couldn't just map another country's?
We can with permission.
With permission, we can.
And we have, and we have. For example, on the way down during different EEZs, exclusive economic zones, we have to check in if we can be collecting data or diving in each one of those countries. So on the way down, there was a gap where we had to turn our sonar off because we did not have permission.
What is it easy, 200 miles out?
200 nautical miles?
200.
So it's, yeah, between 200 and 250. It may be actually 200 or 250, but I think it's 200.
Was that set by
215? 200.
UNCLOS, United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea?
I'm not sure what governing body, if it was that or if it was
Hackensack City Council.
more related to. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Poughkeepsie.
I took a whole class on that, and I remember one of them was the territorial sea used to be 3 nautical miles out, and it was because that was how far a cannon could shoot.
Yeah.
It's like, huh.
All right,
I know
it was
state waters, for example, in the U.S. are 12 nautical miles, I think.
Yeah, it changed
And
since
then,
we got rid of cannons.
Then
But
Well,
there's
still
some,
technically
there's some
Ease around
territory. I
200.
know Okeanos uses Guam. Yeah. What other?
my highly technical insight.
Marshall Islands independent?
That's where all the
Brian, what
yachts
did someone
are
send in?
registered.
I was just being foolish about the fact that cannons still exist.
Oh.
Yeah, like 3 years ago, I think, is when they changed to from cannons. And the territorial sea got bigger.
It's pretty recent. We have a question coming in about how competitive the application process is for being an intern. And
Apply and find out.
yeah, apply early. Start your preparing your application now.
Yes, didn't Ed say they cut it off at 100?
Yeah, I think it might vary by department, but and it's that or the deadline, whichever comes first.
Is it raining
It's,
outside? Is it raining out there?
I don't know. Kind of rains every day, so it might be now.
yes. What do you? We're going here. Yep.
I can activate the rain sensor at the back of the
It's
van.
in manual mode. He's changing heading
it
and
just your
going there at
hand?
the same
The
time.
door.
Just
Open the door.
With the giant anchor, it's not as easy to, and the weather, it's not as easy to do that. We could do it by computer, but it'd be slower. This is faster, but not as accurate.
Usually the winds kick up when it's raining.
So now that we're heading into it, it'll probably
14.
drive straight for it. Nope.
Yeah, this is with our sonar mapping for our viewer who was making comment about having commentary for this. This is, if we are mapping, we typically don't have a typical chat, but this isn't a normal mapping exercise since we were specifically focused on finding the Simone Clipper and have the science team in the control van identifying targets. And when we do our multi-beam mapping, we also don't have an ROV in the water. Right now we have Argus. We still haven't seen any wreckage from the Clipper yet, but we're continuing along our path about 15 or so meters above the seafloor, and we're about 3,300 meters deep. So a good distance down. And actually it's much deeper than when the Simone Clipper actually did crash. They thought the water wasn't nearly as deep as it actually was, so even if they had wanted to or tried to, they wouldn't have had the length of cable necessary to try and hook and pull up the wreckage.
that one either. Is that okay?
Back then they didn't have, obviously, GPS, so they didn't fly to like fixes. So them establishing a route is kind of them, in a way, making fixes for the next aircraft to go and using celestial navigation and just visual points. Is that what they were trying to do, Lonnie?
That's it.
Yeah. That's hardcore.
And you have winds aloft. It's easy to get blown off course.
Right.
You get cloud cover so that you can't use your sextant.
So they're just finding all that out on the first go around.
Compass headings and wind calculations and adjustments, and they didn't have visual points.
Yeah, especially over massive ocean. They're like, it's really impressive what they used to do.
They had an INS by then, though, didn't they?
INS,
Gyro.
National Navigation System. Well, they had compasses, I guess, for their instruments, like a vacuum system. Yeah, that would be a thing, right, Lonnie? They would have had like
And the old school
gyros, like they, they would have had like a vacuum
was that?
system for their gauges.
I would think they'd have that, right?
Right, I think so.
Yeah.
When did they have an INS? Was maybe not in the 30s. Maybe it wasn't until after the war. But they
You're
drift.
saying, like, so yeah, the gyroscopes are like vacuum powered, but the INS is like.
Well, same thing, same.
Is
Gyro, yeah, but it drifts, right? Doesn't
right.
know.
Yeah, over time. You have to correct
Doesn't
for
know
it.
where north is. It's not a
Let me
north-seeking
tell you
gyro.
what they have for flight instruments.
Yeah. There's a really good picture that Dan put up every now and then. It comes by and it has the whole cockpit.
Right. They have airspeed indicators with a heated pitot tube.
Tomato flaps. You remember that?
Yeah, sensitive altimeters, turn and bank indicator, rate of climb indicator, artificial horizon, and they give the companies for all these. Directional gyros, magnetic compasses, 8-day clock, vacuum gauge, rudder tab position indicators, air temperature thermometer, flap position indicator, and the flap pressure gauges.
What's an 8-day clock?
That's what I was going to ask.
What?
An
Besides the
8-day
obvious.
clock.
An 8-day clock.
Yeah.
8-day clock is the, well, I can tell you what I think
Accurate
it is, but
timepiece.
not in terms of aviation.
Yeah.
Used to be the family clock that you would have like up on the mantle, and you put a clock key in, you wind it.
It would last for 8 days.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I have one at home.
Money?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
So their directional gyro was, when did they get north-seeking gyros? Because that was a big deal, all right? Directional gyro would drift
Oh, that's
over time. You have to
Most of the
correct it with a
technology
compass
was
heading.
accelerated during the war.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that.
They had
Might
an
know
electrical.
that.
They had
Navigation
electrical
trivia.
tachometers, manifold pressure gauges, oil pressure gauges, oil inlet temperature gauges, oil outlet temperature gauges, fuel
wow.
quantity gauges, fuel pressure gauges. This is something I don't know. Potentiometer.
Potentiometer.
Potentiometer, thank
Wow.
you. With 12-point switch, ignition switch, starter switch with booster, engine synchronizer light.
It's a good bit.
Do you remember having to memorize all for the flight test?
Yes.
Tomato flaps. That's the acronym. It's all the equipment you need. You're required
to
by
have.
the FAA
Yeah.
to have before you take off in any plane, and it's like altimeter, tachometer, oil pressure gauge, is magnetic compass, and so on and so on.
Yeah, that was a good learning aid, you
Yeah.
just said. Yeah.
Never forget
Good
it.
memory aid, right.
So for our viewers asking, we haven't seen anything floating in the water yet other than some sea cucumbers and some marine snow.
There's been, I think, a ctenophore and some jellyfish.
There you go.
I think really early in the dive, right when we were putting Argus down, in the notes it said there was a hatchet fish.
Ooh.
It's very exciting.
And we are on line 20. We have line 21 above us still to do, but we are just getting ready to start 20. And then after that, we have our expanded search area that we'll be moving towards. Our ears have not popped because we are still on the ship. We are not. We have an ROV down there, and that's a remotely operated vehicle. And since it's remotely operated, we don't have to be in it. And there'd be no place really for us to be inside of it anyways. And that allows us...
Doesn't have an inside.
Yeah. So the great part about having an ROVs is it's pretty inhospitable, to say the least, traveling to such great depths for humans, and it would take a great deal of time to get down, and then you'd have a short time on the bottom before you'd have to come back up. With ROVs, we have been running on this dive, which is 1056 for 60 plus hours straight.
Yep.
So every 4 hours we change watch, and so at 4 o'clock another group will come in, at 8 o'clock another group will come in, and then at midnight we will come back, and we continue to do so until our dive is done. So that allows us to make the most of our exploration time. Ocean exploration is a time-consuming and expensive venture, so it's great to have the ROV so we can A, not risk human life by sending anybody down there, and B, be able to make the most of our time.
Okay, I think I'm gonna move the ship along the track.
All right, marking
Okay.
start of line 20.
Bridge nav. We can proceed along the selected line, bearing 080, speed 1 knot. Thank you.
If you'd like to create your own ROV, there's a lot of great educational resources out there. You can Google ROV in a bucket, and there's a really nice PDF file that you can use. Go to Home Depot, maybe your local marine store or Amazon, and buy some parts for just a little over $100 and make your own ROV. Using an AUV might be a bit faster when it comes to search, but we don't have one on board. We're using what we have, so we have Argus only in the water, and that's actually the first time we've done something like this since, I believe, 2010, Dr. Brennan had said, which coincidentally when it's his birthday, so just see him on watch soon. Make sure you send in a happy birthday message to him.
Give him the perfect birthday present of finding the Simone Clipper.
Yep.
Who could want more?
I don't know if any of our ROV pilots or anyone in general might know the answer to this question, but there's a great one that came in about how we use Argus and Hercules in tandem, about when that idea or process came about and how long that's been around, or people have been doing that. Anybody by any chance know that?
Sounds like a Dan question.
Yeah, it's a Dan question.
How long?
Have we been using 2-part ROV systems?
I don't know the two-body history too well.
Yeah.
I'm a single-body kind of guy. Nautilus has been around since 2008.
Right.
I believe when Hercules was put on, so.
Let's call Todd Gregory, see if he knows.
Yeah. Before that, Jason was 2-body.
Jason's been around for a while.
So, Nautilus definitely didn't innovate this process. It's been around for a ways.
Technically, the two-body, so the two-body thing is a kind of a science ROV thing, but the pioneers, ISE and Oceaneering, had a caged system where the ROV went down in a cage or garage and then flew out of the garage on a tether, and there was a basically underwater winch.
I worked with a oceaneering ROV that had a kilometer of tether in the cage.
So how is the winch like controlled? I mean, so it's like it keeps tension on the tether as it.
No, it's up to the pilot to keep tether. You basically manage it like you do Herc and Argus and keep the tether loose. You know when it's tight because it starts pulling against the vehicle and you fight it. And there's a camera looking back at the tether, and then
there's a camera in the cage looking at the tether too in the winch.
Yeah.
The one I worked with, the tether was negative.
The tether's typically meant to be neutrally buoyant, but they get scratched and dented. Basically, they get holes in the protective coating, and seawater gets in, and they become heavy. But nowadays, the standard is 800 meters of tether, and they're up around the 1,600 meters of tether. And Oceaneering is still using the cage system because they deploy a lot of their vehicles from a fixed platform. But vehicles that are commercial vehicles that run from boats use a top hat system, and that has a tether management system incorporated into between the down wire or the umbilical and the ROV. So the whole mess is launched and lowered to a working depth, and then the ROV detaches and flies out. It is in effect the same as Herc and Argus. So the Argus at the end of the down wire takes the motion of the ship, and that allows the ROV to maneuver without being coupled to 3,000 meters of wire. So yeah, and the answer to your question is as long as there's been ROVs, there's been two bodies.
Thanks for that. So Rennie, as we go along these lines, is the ship generally just kind of programmed in terms of its course, or do they have to continue to pilot it manually to stay on course?
So the ship has a dynamic positioning control system. So tied in with the ship's GPS, we're able to, the computer is able to keep us in a specific point within tolerances, using a jet pump at the stern of the ship and a bow thruster on the bow, or located near the bow. And if you're able to stay in one position, we're also able to computer control tell a ship to track a line at a certain bearing, which we're doing at this slow speed because the way the ship needs to be oriented to face into the weather. If we were driving multi-beam lines with the ship's main engine, that's piloted manually. So the pilot would be steering the ship and staying on a line by manually operating the rudder.
Thanks. So the question about the side scan that you're seeing on channel 1, you're right, the left side is the left side of Argus, the right side is the right side of Argus, or port and starboard, and the black area you see in the middle is the nadir. So since this is side scan sonar, it doesn't scan underneath it. But you're in luck because we are positioned about 15 meters or so above the ocean floor. So even though we are not getting any side scan or any sonar readings of that, that goes along with that side scan map, we are looking at it visually and we can confirm whether there is, or in this case isn't, any wreckage, pieces, or components of the Samoan clipper so far. The